Hey, welcome to Crossroads. Folks, right now there is a growing possibility we may go to war with the Chinese Communist Party over Taiwan. At least that's what they're saying. The CCP has surrounded Taiwan. They've been holding military drills. They're saying this is just the start of it and there's more to come. Now, briefly on this, let me explain what's going on right now. There is a very real possibility the Chinese Communist Party could try to take Taiwan, including by force. I know they've been saying it for a long time, but the recent presidential inaugurations in Taiwan, which I covered, by the way, you might have seen a special feature on it. The recent inaugurations also represented a declaration of Taiwanese independence. That has been a red line drawn in the sand by the Chinese Communist Party. The U.S. government has not recognized Taiwanese independence either under Trump or Biden or anybody else, going back to the Carter administration. Congress, though, has stood by Taiwan. And given the current situation of, frankly, global conflicts accelerating, there's a very real possibility right now the Chinese Communist Party could use the current environment to try something. Now, look, there was a shocking statement issued a couple days ago. It was from the CCP Defense Minister Dong Jun. And he's now saying that the Chinese Communist Party will, quote, forcefully stop Taiwanese independence. Again, in the current administration, the new government in Taiwan, they're about Taiwanese independence. Al Jazeera had it. They say that Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun has said the country's military was ready to forcefully stop Taiwan's independence in a fiery speech at a Singapore Security Forum, speaking at the Shangri-La Dialogue Conference in Singapore on Sunday. And it's that Dong said the self-ruled democracy of Taiwan was the, quote, core of core issues for China. In other words, for the Chinese Communist Party, this is the number one thing. Of all the things they want to achieve right now, this is number one. Briefly on that as well, Xi Jinping recently had a major meeting where he announced all the new policies of the Chinese Communist Party. Xi Jinping right now is reforming a lot of the politics in China because he's walking the footsteps now of becoming chairman, like almost in the footsteps of Mao Zedong. The CCP before this, even though they're still a communist country, they still had some divisions of power. A lot of those represented more like, factions and so on within the party. Similar to political parties elsewhere, but they're all one party. It's all the Chinese Communist Party. And within these factions, there's basically different control of businesses and money and things like that. And so factional issues for them tie into financial, incentives and, power incentives and that kind of thing. And because they're always at each other's throats, they're always fighting and struggling with each other, part of the ideology of the party, being able to control who has the guns, like for example, plainclothes police, for them, that's a big power issue as well. Xi Jinping recently consolidated a lot of this. So Xi now is in control of basically all of that. And he's rolling out his new policies within a control system over this. He's trying to revive what seems to be like Mao-era communist policies. They're even creating militias within some of the big businesses. This is the kind of stuff you saw under Mao Zedong, things that have not happened for a long time. Given that situation, Xi Jinping needs to demonstrate the power of his party. And a lot of people believe that Taiwan is going to be the way they demonstrate it. Anytime you have a leader come in, the first thing they want to do is crack down on a certain group, launch a persecution, or do some kind of military venture. A lot of them are saying that Taiwan could be the military venture of Xi Jinping now that he's taken this additional step of consolidating power. Now, briefly on the story as well, they're saying that Taiwan now is the core of core issues for the Chinese Communist Party. The article says, but he claimed as well, the defense minister, that Taiwan's governing Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, the current party in power in Taiwan, was incrementally pursuing separatism and bent on erasing Chinese identity. On that note, look, Taiwan is already self-governing, right? They have their own government, they have their own military. If they were part of China, part of the Chinese Communist Party, why would the Chinese Communist Party need to conquer them? Well, the simple reason for that is because they're a different country. The policy, though, they've had going back into history was that Taiwan used to believe it was the official government of all of China, and the CCP used to argue it was the official government of all of China. Taiwan is a remnant, the current government, of the civil war that took place between the Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party. And unfortunately, after World War II, when the United States, occupied actually Western China, the United States tried preventing a civil war from happening, and by doing that, unfortunately prevented the Kuomintang from destroying the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP consolidated its power, and because the Kuomintang had lost most of its fighting force during World War II, the CCP was able to regroup and launch a counterattack after the U.S. pulled out, which resulted in a Chinese Communist Party takeover of all of China. The Kuomintang was pushed into the islands of Formosa, now known as Taiwan, and it was there that they built what is current-day Taiwan, a country with its own government, its own military, actually one of the top economies in the world. And because of that, they've been a thorn in the side of the Chinese Communist Party. In Taiwan, a lot of the current people they've gotten rid of the policy where they believe that they're the official government of China, and they want to basically push the CCP out of all of China. They've gone the other way where it's true, a lot of them don't see themselves as Chinese anymore. They regard themselves as Taiwanese. And even sometimes local identities like Kinmen Island, they would call themselves Kinmenese. Given that situation, the CCP is, still claiming its end of that whole thing and still believes that it should own Taiwan as well. And so they're arguing that Taiwan's declaration of being an independent country, of saying that they no longer really want to take back China and so on, is a direct threat to the CCP itself. Now back to this, they note that last month it staged 2 days of war games, the Chinese Communist Party, around the island after the May 20th inauguration of President William Lai Ching-te. Lai, the new president of Taiwan, who was the vice president before, and the DPP, his party, say it is up to the people of Taiwan to decide their future. And notes that Beijing calls him a separatist. And they say, quote, those separatists recently made fanatical statements that show their betrayal of the Chinese nation and their ancestors. They will be nailed to the pillar of shame in history, Dong said. And remember, this is the head of the Chinese, one of the heads of the Chinese military. He adds that the Chinese People's Liberation Army, that's the official army of the Chinese Communist Party, has always been an indestructible and powerful force in defense of the unification of the motherland, and will act resolutely and forcefully at all times to curb the independence of Taiwan and to ensure that it never succeeds in its attempts. And he added, whoever dares to split Taiwan from China will be crushed to pieces and suffer his own destruction. That's what's going on right now, folks. Now, here's a bit more on how those drills went. Because remember what I've been saying for a while. An invasion of Taiwan by the Chinese Communist Party would be devastating to the CCP. Taiwan, in terms of just geographical position and the way the waters are around it, it's mostly shallow water all around the island except for the southeast tip where you have some deep water which allows for submarine ports. The CCP can't really access that. If they were to try to invade Taiwan, it would be a massive rocket barrage, and it would be, the PLA Marine Landing Forces and Navy forces. And it would be devastating for them. Imagine, for example, the American war on D-Day, where, the Germans had their machine gun nests and so on. But add to that modern day weapons, where all those ships and everything else coming in could be instantly destroyed. This would be devastating to the CCP. And so what I've been saying is you'd probably see a couple different ways this would unfold. You'd very likely have more of a castle siege type scenario, where the CCP surrounds the islands, chokes them off, and then tries to stir up internal instability in Taiwan, and then of course tries to do external propaganda and so on to keep other countries out of it. Now, we didn't see that happen just recently, but the CCP did in fact surround Taiwan. The Guardian said that China has conducted mock missile strikes against Taiwan on a second day of military drills, which it said was testing its ability to seize power. In other words, take over Taiwan, and inflict punishment for, quote, separatist acts after the inauguration of the island's new president. It notes the exercises, which involve Chinese military units from the Air Force, Rocket Force. The Rocket Force is like the one where I said they do rocket barrages. They're the ones in charge of that, including the nuclear weapons, by the way. The Navy, the Army, and the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard's militarized as well. It's basically their Navy as well. Were announced suddenly on Thursday morning. It notes that maps showed 5 approximate target areas in the sea surrounding Taiwan's main island, and other areas near Taiwan's offshore islands, which are close to the Chinese mainland. It says that China's Defense Ministry said the drills on Friday were testing its military capability to seize power and occupy key areas in line with Beijing's ultimate goal of annexing Taiwan, which they're currently trying to do. Now, look, of course, there were different takes on a timeline. Before, people were saying maybe 2049, some were saying 2030. Now they're saying 2027, a couple years out. Others say it could be at any moment. In reality, given the CCP's language right now, given international instability right now, but most importantly, given the fact that the CCP is moving forward with what I said they were going to do, which is try to start multiple wars in the world to, again, break up U.S. military response and the ability of the U.S. to provide aid to countries in their defense, the CCP has successfully created that environment. Of course, the war between Russia and Ukraine is now currently accelerating. For example, Ukraine is now striking targets within Russia, and Russia is regrouping and expanding its military quite a bit, even dragging in some other countries. The CCP is even now providing some of the equipment to Russia, which was a red line before, by the way. You have the wars with terror groups spreading, with Iran and otherwise. You have North Korea becoming more hostile. You have other things happening, including in Latin America, and the possibility of a war in Guyana. And so given the circumstance where the CCP is in fact playing a hand in all of these different conflicts, they need that clout if they're going to do this operation against Taiwan. Maybe it will be a couple years before they have the full system of international conflict established, if they can do it. But this is what they're trying to do right now. Briefly on this. Now, after the drills, the Chinese Communist Party suggested it was more meant to send a message, right, the military drills. But it also suggested it would take further action against Taiwan if Taiwan continues pushing for independence. And I'll tell you right now, they're going to keep pushing for independence because that's the main policy of the new party. Reuters noted that the joint drills by the People's Liberation Army were a measure to contain aggressive Taiwanese independence and separatist activities and a warning against foreign interference. That means us, folks. And it's the CCP Defense Ministry spokesperson Wu Qiang said in Beijing, quote, "We have reached our expected goals." And he said, "We are confident that despite turbulence and changes in outside situation, we will deal with everything with ease." And he vowed stronger countermeasures by the military in China against any further moves by, quote, separatist forces. By that he's referring to the Taiwanese government, the official government of Taiwan. Now, look, of course, remember, Taiwan is not going to back off the idea of independence. That's one of the main things they just voted on, in fact. One of the main narratives of the political party currently in power in Taiwan was independence. I'll be talking about this more after a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges with a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold. You can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The Chinese Communist Party is positioning itself for a potential war over Taiwan, and concerns have been brewing over this for a few years. I know we've been talking about it for a long time. But with the recent Taiwanese presidential inauguration, just recently, of a pro-Taiwanese independence president, the risk of a potential takeover has never seemed closer. Now look, of course, it's unlikely Taiwan is going to back off the idea of independence, as I was saying. Because that's the red line being drawn in the sand by the Chinese Communist Party. They say, keep saying it, and they're going to keep moving on their end. Now, independence has been one of the main campaign points of the current president, the one who was just inaugurated. In other words, this is what the Taiwanese people voted on. Now, the U.S. government has maintained a position of not recognizing Taiwanese independence. There's a bit of confusion over this. This was a policy not only under Biden, it was also a policy under Donald Trump. It actually goes all the way back to Jimmy Carter. And again, under the Carter administration, that was when a lot of the things on Taiwan shifted. It was questionably legal how Jimmy Carter repositioned American foreign policy on Taiwan, given that he avoided a congressional vote to change some key U.S. policies. But part of that change in policy was that, prior to that, the United States recognized Taiwan as the official government of all of China. Because at the time, both the Taiwanese government and the CCP were claiming they were the legitimate government of China. Because again, they had a very bloody civil war, which led to the CCP taking over the mainland. But the Kuomintang had been the government before that, and they were pushed into Taiwan. Jimmy Carter changed that, bypassed Congress in doing it, but the U.S., regardless of that, has maintained a strong policy of backing Taiwan and helping it defend itself were a conflict to take place. And members of Congress actually recently went to Taiwan as a demonstration of that support. So that support's still in place. Axios noted a U.S. congressional delegation met with Taiwan's new president on Monday and promised weapons the self-governing island ordered in the face of threats from China. It said they were on their way. It says the visit, led by House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Michael McCaul from Texas, a Republican, comes days after the Chinese military held drills around the democratically run island that it claims is its territory in protest of the inauguration of Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te. And notes that other members of the bipartisan delegation to Taiwan included Representatives Jimmy Panetta, a Democrat from California, Young Kim, Republican from California, Joe Wilson, Chrissy Howland, and Representative Andy Barr. Actually, you have a good mix of Republicans and Democrats in there. Now, again, remember, support for Taiwan, and frankly, even now, relative opposition to the Chinese Communist Party. This is mostly a bipartisan issue. This is, in my opinion, one of the few issues that Republicans and Democrats tend to generally agree on. You find that a lot of the votes on these things tend to get majority votes from both sides. And so Taiwan, U.S. support for Taiwan, and U.S. opposition to the CCP, these have actually become pretty core issues within the U.S. government itself. And that's important because sometimes countries, when you have foreign policy, they just wait it out. They're like, okay, it'll change in 4 years, maybe 2 years when they have the midterm elections. A lot of countries understand that the U.S. political system, because, tyrannical countries that don't have elections and so on, like the CCP, they know that the U.S. policies will change every couple years if there's a division between Republicans and Democrats. And so they'll just wait things out, usually. They won't make noise. They'll wait till they have a favorable environment. Then they'll do what they want to do. And so they calculate things based on the American electoral process. When there's agreement between both Republicans and Democrats, though, when both sides of the U.S. government are generally in agreement, that's a very different message. And so for the CCP, this represents U.S. solidarity against it and against the idea of it trying to take over Taiwan by force. And remember also that Taiwan has global importance. There is some self-interest involved maybe on America's part as well. One of the big issues is the fact that a good portion of the world's semiconductors come from Taiwan. And if the CCP were to invade Taiwan, this would actually have really serious consequences for global manufacturing, high-tech, anything basically. Fox News noted the Chinese invasion of Taiwan would have catastrophic consequences for the global economy, including in the United States, warned House Foreign Affairs Chairman Michael McCaul, the one who recently went to Taiwan, by the way. And he said the thing that really, I think, makes this island extremely important is that 90% of the advanced semiconductor manufacturing for the world happens right there. And if an invasion happens, I don't see a scenario where that survives. You know that everybody that has phones, cars, we have advanced weapon systems, everything is dependent on semiconductors. And this island, Taiwan, over time, because we've offshored manufacturing. We put ourselves in a very vulnerable position by doing that. And the shutdown of what's happening here, semiconductors, would really shut down the world. So he's saying basically if they were to invade Taiwan, that would be a death blow to the global high-tech industry. It would bring global shipping and a lot of other things to a standstill in some regards. And you could argue, well, there's other places, like South Korea, which the CCP would also move on as well if something were to happen. Remember, South Korea is in a gray area. They're not part of the U.S. alliance, right, with Japan and Australia and India and others. They're kind of between the U.S. and the CCP, and their politics are also very divided on that. And so if the CCP were to invade Taiwan, they would not take over the semiconductor factories. What you would see happen is that basically they'd be sabotaged. They would be unusable. And that would shut down that part of the global market. The other thing you would have is other companies like NVIDIA, which is trying to build up this stuff, other U.S. companies trying to rapidly create this, and even Taiwan's semiconductor company, TSMC, trying to build America-based manufacturing facilities for semiconductors. But if a war with Taiwan were to happen before the completion of that, what would instead happen is that the high-grade semiconductors would be cut off, essentially, to a large extent. And you would then have the lower-grade ones, which the CCP can compete on because they're able to manufacture lower-grade semiconductors. You would have those then gain a larger market share globally. And so for the CCP right now, this very thin window of time is very useful, adding, again, more danger to what's currently happening, especially, again, as global conflict spreads. Now, briefly on this as well, the CCP has already started retaliating in some of its own ways, not just militarily, but with other things. They have sanctions, for example, and they're even sanctioning American citizens and American leaders. China, the Chinese Communist Party, has banned former Representative Mike Gallagher, who used to chair the House Select Committee on the CCP. He can no longer enter China, and there's other measures against him for allegedly interfering in China's internal affairs. That's a fancy way of saying you criticized the CCP, or again, you were part of U.S. sanctions against the CCP. I'll be talking about more about this, though, and these sanctions and how the lines are being drawn in the sand, again, over a possible conflict with Taiwan. It's going to be exclusively on Epoch TV, though. So if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, click the link and join us for the rest of the episode. And folks, the Chinese Communist Party's infiltration and subversion of the West is one of the biggest issues that our country is facing. The Chinese Communist Party, I know we face a lot of domestic issues and otherwise. The CCP represents a threat to the survival of the United States. In fact, the CCP's own slogan is "We live, you die." They don't believe there could become a state where there would be shared power between the Chinese Communist Party and the United States. And the other option they have, the China model, represents a totalitarian communist model of government that they want to export globally. The only thing standing in the way of that is the United States. And I know, there's a lot of conflicts here and otherwise. If the United States were to fall, if the United States were to back off from that leadership position, you would have the CCP steamroll in. Now, look, this is an issue that the Epoch Times has extensively covered. Our reporting on the Chinese regime is really one of the best, some of the best out there. We have documentaries, special features, in-depth reports, and investigations on what the CCP is doing, including against the United States. In fact, my own documentary, The Final War, is an investigative documentary that serves as a guide for Americans on how to counter the CCP's influence and ultimately deter the CCP threat that they're, again, making right now. The film examines Beijing's long-term strategy against the United States. You can watch that exclusively on epochtv.com. So again, click the button below, join us on the Epoch Times, and I'll show you a trailer of the final war documentary before we continue.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.